千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. So let me say a few words about chapter 42 of the Tao Te Ching. This chapter has become a favorite for many students of the Tao, myself included. Why is it a favorite? Well, because it lays out the pattern of universal creation, starting from the very beginning. In so doing, chapter 42 also illuminates the thought process of the ancient sages. How did they come up with this stuff? That alone makes it absolutely fascinating to me. So now, let's delve into 42 together. Here's Tao Te Ching 42. Here's how the translation goes. Tao produces one. One produces two. Two produce three. Three produce myriad things. Myriad things backed by yin and embracing yang achieve harmony by integrating their energy. What the people dislike are alone, bereft, and unworthy. But the rulers call themselves with these terms. So without things appear to take loss but benefit, or receive benefit but lose. What the ancients taught, I would also teach. The violent one cannot have a natural death. I will use this as the principle of all teachings. So that's what the chapter says. And with the experience that we have accumulated, we can already see that there is a progression from one line to another, and also a progression from one section to another. So let's go ahead and try to see if we can recognize repeating characters. Please feel free to do it on your own, looking at the Chinese characters, even if you don't know Chinese, and then attempting to identify the identical characters that repeat from line to line. The first set of repeating characters, I think, rather easy, kind of jumps out. Easy to identify. As you can see, the middle character of the first three lines, exactly the same. And if you say, well, the second character is exactly the same, you'll extend it down to line 4. That character is Sheng. It's translated as produce, producing, produces. It's not a character that's easily translated into an exact English equivalent. It has a whole bunch of attendant meanings like giving rise to, allowing something to emerge, to transition from, to evolve from, to transform from something that is the predecessor. Or, from the perspective of the predecessor, to give rise to what follows. But I'll talk about the translation of that in just a moment. Let's stick to the characters for now. So looking at the repeating characters here, I think it's tempting to say that, well, obviously, lines 1 to 4 are one section. Maybe that's the first section. They seem to fit together. They seem to talk about the same thing. And at that point, I would say, okay, well, that's a good thought, but hold on 1 second. Let's look at the lines that come after to see if they should also be included. Now, if we do that, we would also detect more repetition. That is, if you take a look, the last 2 characters of line 4 are the exact same 2 characters as the beginning of line 5. Can everyone see what I'm talking about? Here's the highlights that'll point them out. These are exactly the same. This indicates, this is a hint, even if we don't know how to read the original Chinese, the ancient Chinese, we can tell by the repeating characters that there's a continuation of thoughts. And checking the translation, indeed, that is true. Line 4, 3 produce myriad things, and then line 5, myriad things, backed by yin and embracing yang. When we say backed by yin and embracing yang, that's calling back to the end of line 2, which ends with the character for 2, and the beginning of line 3, which begins with the character for 2. So this is evidently part of the first section. Then, checking the line below, achieve harmony by integrating their energy, that is the energy of yin and yang. So it's related once again. It has to be included too. Therefore, looking at the repeating characters and then assisted by the meaning that we can tell, we can discern, we see that from line 1 to line 6 forms one section, the beginning section. Then let's take a look at what follows. We don't see a whole lot of repeating characters in the lines following this. And hopefully everyone looking at the terms like alone, bereft, and unworthy will remember that we saw all of this back several chapters ago when we talked about how the high is built upon the low as basis, as foundation. High achievements are accumulated from lower level achievements that raise you up to that level. So in that chapter, the same terms are used. So this is a reiteration. This is a repeat from a previous chapter. And whenever something is repeated, it means that there's extra importance associated with them. So looking further down, we see there's definitely repetition. Let me highlight them. So you can see down here, line 11 and line 12, they actually share quite a few characters together. So looking at the context, looking at the meaning, in the middle section, we start out talking about the terms that are lowly terms used by high-level people, the rulers. And therefore, this means that how things appear and how things actually are may be quite different. Therefore, lines 11 and 12 talk about loss as the appearance, but benefit as the actuality. To receive the benefit or to lose, one is the appearance, the other one is the actuality. So this means that lines 11 and 12 conclude the example of the lowly terms. Therefore, we can see that as the middle section. Then it is simple to identify the bottom section, that the ancients have taught certain things. Lao Tzu says, I will also teach them. And the teaching part, the character for teaching, is actually repeated from 13 to 14, as you can see there. And then there's one more iteration down below in the last line. So the last line, the last section centers around the concept of teaching, what the ancients taught, what the Lao Tzu will teach, what we are now here to learn, and teaching and learning from one another. So this is the last section. We will be exploring that in great detail. For now, I want to talk about the number 42, which I'm pretty positive everyone has heard in conjunction with this chapter or perhaps without. 42. The number 42. If you have heard of the significance of 42, please go ahead and type it out in the questions. And here's how I will present it to everyone who hasn't heard of this before. So first of all, the first part of Tao Te Ching, chapter 42, speaks to universal creation, about how something comes out of nothing, about how everything comes out of that something. Now, in a remarkable synchronicity, the number 42 has special significance in pop culture. And I can see by the feedback that this is not taking everyone by surprise, that a lot of you already know about this. So what is that special significance? Well, it is nerd humor, quote unquote. In nerd humor, usually associated with science fiction, 42 is said to be the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. But how is it the answer? How is it the ultimate answer? Well, before we get to that, I want to share with everyone that this is so prevalent because there's such a substantial overlap between science fiction fans and technology buffs that you can ask the same question to Google. A lot of times people joke and say that Google knows everything. So if you have a question, put it to Google and see what it says. You can actually ask Google this question. It will tell you the same thing. You can ask, okay, Google, what is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything? You can do this at any time. You can type this into Google at any time, and it will always come back with the same answer, 42. So where does this come from? What is the etymology of this? The etymology comes from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a science fiction comedy, I would say, that was originally created by author Douglas Adams. It began as a radio show on BBC, later on was made into a television series, and then after that, a movie. So here's a couple of scenes from the movie that goes with the Google answer. So let me explain how this came about. In the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I want to, by talking about this, I want to show everyone how it is actually very deeply connected to the Tao, although the connection may not be obvious. So in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it talks about how in very ancient times, millions of years ago, there is a race of very technologically advanced alien beings, so advanced that they're creating these incredibly powerful computers for answering any conceivable question. And these ancient aliens were so advanced they were effectively immortal. Now they were constantly debating and arguing about the ultimate question. The question of life, the universe, and everything. Because of these constant debates, they decided let's settle this. Let's settle the answer once and for all. We will build the most advanced computer that we can to provide us with the ultimate answer. So they created this computer, they went to this computer called Deep Thought. So this powerful computer received them and heard their question. In the movie, the aliens are depicted by a couple of adorable little girls. So they're actually advanced, immortal alien beings, but they're shown like little girls asking, oh, Deep Thought, what is the ultimate answer? Can you tell us? Can you give us a simple answer about the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything? Deep Thought says, yes, I can give you the answer. Okay, great. What is the answer? But it's going to take some time. So in the original play, the aliens are like, oh, what? We're going to have to wait until after lunch, you know? But the Deep Thought, the computer said, I can calculate the answer for you, but it will take 7.5 million years. So come back in 7.5 million years. So having no choice, the alien said, okay, well, you know, we're effectively immortal, so 7.5 million years, that's a long time, but that's okay, we'll come back. So when they came back, 7.5 million years later, eagerly awaiting the answer, there's widespread celebration. Now, at last, it will be known what the ultimate answer is. So they approached Deep Thought and said, oh, Deep Thought, tell us. The time is now the completion of your program. Tell us the answer. And Deep Thought says, okay, well, I have the answer, but you're not going to like it. And the alien said, well, it doesn't matter. We must know it. Tell us now. So Deep Thought said, 42. And the aliens are like, huh? What? Are you serious? And Deep Thought says, yeah, that's the answer. You set me upon this task. It was not easy, but my programming ran for 7.5 million years. This is the answer. And the aliens are disappointed, to say the least, but it doesn't make any sense. What do you mean it's 42? And the computer says, I think the problem is you don't really know what the actual ultimate question is. Because you don't know the question, the answer doesn't seem to make any sense. So then the aliens are like, okay, well, tell us what the ultimate question is then. You know, the question of you know, the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. That's the question. And Deep Thought says, well, but what is the actual question? So then the aliens are like, well, tell us now. And Deep Thought says, well, I can't. I'm not qualified to be able to tell you. I don't have the computing power to tell you. But I'll tell you who can compute the answer to that. So the aliens are like, oh, okay, great. And then Deep Thought says, the computer that can answer the ultimate question, to tell you what the ultimate question is not me, but the computer that will come after me. A computer that is so advanced that I am not worthy to calculate its parameters. However, I can design it for you and you can build it. Its programming will run for 10 million years to completion. At the end of that time, it will give you the ultimate question. And I have given this ultimate computer a name, Earth. And the aliens in the original radio play were like, Earth? What a dull name. Now, of course, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was written for humor. But beneath the surface of the humor, Douglas Adams had a point. There was a deeper Tao-like point that he wanted to express. So beneath the humor, what he was trying to say is that Earth is this ultimate computer for the ultimate question, so advanced that biological life itself will form part of its operational matrix. So look at this incredible, beautiful world called Earth. We are all part of it. You and I are part of the ultimate quest to find the ultimate question, the question that makes it all make sense. When you understand what Douglas Adams was trying to get at through his humor, you begin to get a glimpse that, well, this is all the reasons we need in the world to cherish this world, our world, Earth. We are all part of it. We're in it together. And that is why 42 beneath the surface is actually intricately connected to the Tao. With Tao Te Ching chapter 42, we're also looking at the exact same quest. Let's move into chapter 42 of the Tao Te Ching. So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was originally a radio play, later on became a television series, as I mentioned. Also, there's a novelization, there's audio recordings of it, and the movie, as I talked about. Let's bring our thoughts back to Tao Te Ching 42, starting with line 1. Line 1, Tao produces 1. Tao Sheng Yi. So the very first character of the very first line is the character for the Tao. Here, specifically, when we talk about the Tao, we're talking about the empty source. The empty source where everything comes from. In the Tao paradigm, it's actually the other way, which is that we don't know what the ultimate source of everything is, but whatever that is, we're going to call it the Tao. That is the name that we have for that. The Tao meaning the path or the way, because universal creation appears to be the way of existence itself. So the emptiness of the Tao means that it's a void. It's a void where nothing seems to exist, and yet it is filled to bursting with possibilities. It is full of infinite potentialities, all waiting for the right time for manifestation into our material world. So then I would like to ask everyone to focus on the emptiness of it, the void, the nothingness. Think of this as the state of non-being or non-existence or zero. Now, when we talk about from the zero comes the one, when we talk about the very beginning, it is natural for us to think about our modern scientific understanding about the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. And it is also tempting for us, for some people, to then say that, well, obviously the ancient sages were well ahead of their time by thousands of years, and they predicted that we would have the Big Bang theory. So that is actually not the case. I want to disabuse everyone of that notion. The ancient sages had no knowledge of modern physics, quantum mechanics, and therefore had no idea about the Big Bang theory or quantum fluctuation, which I will get to in a moment. The concept of the Tao as nothingness came from intuition. not from anything resembling what we think of, what we know as modern science. So I will demonstrate the path that they followed to get to this whole idea of Tao produces one or something emerging out of nothing, and why it makes sense. So let's take a look at the beginning, the very beginning of their thought process, the thought process of the ancient sages. So here's what they knew to start with. As a starting point, here's what the ancient sages knew. Number one, they knew that they existed. They knew that the world existed. So this was the evidence and the starting point. So they looked around and they saw that everything around them, it might be natural, might be trees, plants, animals, mountains, hills, rivers, everything. Or it might be something that they created, a tool, a container, decoration, a hut, a house, a conveyance like transportation, something. All the things around them, natural things or man-made objects, they could all be traced back to a time when that thing, whatever it is, did not exist. Living things, once upon a time, they were born. Before that, they did not exist. Man-made items, they exist now, the ones that we can see, but once upon a time, they did not exist. Therefore, from number one and number two, they could see that it must be true somehow, at some point in time, everything, existence itself, came out of non-existence. It seems to be the pattern that everything follows. Therefore, we can describe it as the one, and the one can mean something, anything, everything. The one emerges from the zero state. The zero state is the nothingness, the void, the emptiness. So that is the conclusion based on observation and intuition. Let's push a little bit further into line 2. Line 2 says one produces two. Wow. How does that come about? What is that insight? Well, the ancient sages continue their observation. They observe the astonishing variety, the diversity of life out in nature. Just by looking at the numerous varieties of life, they knew that there had to be some kind of progression from one to many. So they got to, from zero, you get to one. Now, that's not the end of the story, because they look around and they see just endless variety. So how do you get from the one to the profusion of life that they saw all around them? Well, observing the natural world, they saw that there's reproduction, there's procreation. They saw how it's so prevalent in the animal world, including human beings. The male-female reproductive pattern repeats itself endlessly through all different kinds of creatures. So they realized that yin and yang must play a central role. Somehow, some way, the one must lead to the two. It must give rise to the two. Therefore, they would say that the duality of yin and yang must emerge from the oneness that originally emerged from the zero state, the emptiness of the Tao. This was then extrapolated to cover all complementary dualities, not just male and female. They realized that the concept was far bigger than man, woman, male, female, the genders. it was also everything else. Night and day, light and darkness, left and right, up and down, inside, outside, big, small, tall, short, good, bad, positive, negative. The list just goes on and on. Everywhere they looked, they saw manifestations of duality. So then there's a little bit more in their thinking about that. And I wanted to clarify some of the common misconceptions that I encountered from time to time. So I have a section here called Misconceptions, Clarifications. So first of all, I want to make sure everyone knows that yin and yang, the term, the expression, does not map to male and female. I've been saying male and female just because that is the convention we normally follow in English. But the order in Mandarin is the reverse. It's the opposite. Yin is female. Yang is male. So yin and yang, the actual accurate translation will be female and male. Or if it's helpful, think of yin and yang as our conventional, socially accepted norm of addressing ladies and gentlemen. That's yin and yang. Or, think of ladies first, yin and yang. So yin is female. That's number one. Number two, this emphasis on yin being female, yang being male, I do not mean to imply that yin and yang are primarily about biological gender. No, that could not be further from the truth. I want to clarify that the original concept is actually quite the opposite, in that it covered every complementary duality, all the complementary pairs out there, and that includes male and female. So gender is just one of the many ways that yin and yang is able to manifest in this world of ours. So I want to encourage everyone to not automatically think of yin and yang as female and male, or male and female, but think of it in terms of something that is more general, more abstract. It is more accurate to think of yin and yang as energy, essence, or principle. Thus, both men and women embody yin and yang to varying degrees at all times, because it's energy, it's a state of being. Now, in the original Mandarin, there's no character for and, A and D. The original Mandarin is simply yin yang, which would be yin yang in English. Now let's focus on this idea of how just because you may be male in gender, that doesn't mean that you have yang and you are not yin. In reality, you have both. It's the same with women. You may be a woman, which is yin, but within you, there's all kinds of different energy levels, essence, concepts, tendencies that can all be characterized as a mixture of yin and yang. So we're all that way at all times. To go a little bit further, as an example, it's very normal, it's very common for a man to have yin qualities. A man can be quiet, he can be an introvert, he can be inactive. These are all states related to yin, the yin principle. So in a similar way, it's very common and it's very normal for a woman to have yang qualities. The woman may be outgoing. She may be very chipper, bright, outspoken. She may be active. She may be expressive. These are all yang qualities. You can easily imagine a woman, perhaps a girl, who is vivacious, sociable, friendly. Guess what? Those are all yang qualities. To be withdrawn, to be passive would be yin qualities. That can happen to men and women. So let's all get used to thinking of we ourselves as embodying both yin and yang at all times, to varying degrees, varying proportions. The important point is that we need the right balance between the two. Going into extremes for one or the other is bad for us, counterproductive, leads to a lack of joy, lack of happiness. The moderate balance, a balancing equilibrium between the two, is what brings the joy. So remember, every single one of us, regardless of your gender, possess both yin and yang energies or essence, principles. The important thing is the balance. I put an underline here because this is something that I want to come back to several times in our discussion on 42. Now, let me get to the overall pattern of something coming from nothing, which I would very often call creation or Genesis. So this is when we talk about the Tao producing one producing two, etc. This chapter is actually the closest that the Tao will ever get to a creation mythology. So religions of the world, and the Tao is not a religion, religions of the world all have some sort of associated creation mythology. We'll talk about the well-known ones, like the Garden of Eden. But this is chapter 42 is the closest that the Tao will ever get to that level. And yet the pattern is universally applicable, as I will demonstrate. So we can compare the Tao with other schools of thought. And I want to show a table on that. In this table, here we're talking about creation, Genesis, the beginning of the universe. In the beginning, you'll see the three columns: Western thought to the left, Eastern thought to the right, scientific thought in the middle. So let me say a few words about this. I put in Western thought and Eastern thought as if they were monolithic, as if there's one thing that encapsulates all of them, when in fact, in both Western thoughts and Eastern thought, there's a great diversity of opinions, many different sects of beliefs, many different approaches, different concepts and ideas. Now, in order for us to have a high-level discussion for comparison purposes, we need to simplify and streamline. So for Western thought, I would simply use the Judeo-Christian tradition as the most familiar representative of Western thought. In a similar way, when we talk about Eastern thought, that encapsulates so much thinking from a large fraction of humanity, it isn't just the Tao that we're talking about. Eastern thought includes so many other things. There's Buddhist teachings, there's Hinduism, there's all kinds of stuff that we can't quite get into, but I am nominating the Tao for our purposes as representative of Eastern thought. Indeed, if you walk into a bookstore and look up books on Eastern thought, you're going to find that the Tao is actually quite prominent. Now, the diversity of ideas and concepts and opinions in Eastern and Western thought would not replicate itself in scientific thoughts, and this is because science as a discipline has broad consensus on important theories that have been proven again and again through all kinds of experiments. So scientific thought is much more unified than either Western thought or Eastern thought. There's no one symbol that captures it, but I have a graphic here, which is a graphical depiction of scientific genesis, the creation of the universe. I'll get to that in a moment. I'll get to those terms in just a moment. So let's start with Western thought as represented by the Judeo-Christian tradition. In that tradition, God is the omnipresent, ultimate source that itself does not require a source. Or the way that we put it, it is the eternal, causeless cause that has always been there. It always was, God always was, and always will be. God is the ultimate, eternal, causeless cause. So the next one may be a little bit surprising, and I will explain. What would be the equivalence in science? Well, there are 3 answers at the moment. The honest answer is unknown. The typical answer is nothing. That before the universe, there was simply nothing. And then there's also multiverse, which figures prominently in string theory and its extra-dimensional extension M theory, the letter M, the multiverse. So when we talk about string theory, the multiverse, I want to make sure everyone understands that it is really still not too different from the unknown or nothing, because string theory is more in the way of a hypothesis. It's mathematically elegant, but it hasn't produced something that is testable yet with modern technology. Therefore, it is nowhere near as well established as the Big Bang. Now, before we delve too deeply into that, let's not lose sight of the Tao. Eastern thought, which we are talking about now, the Tao is the empty source, the nothingness that is the source of everything. So that is the equivalent to God being the causeless cause. Then let's push on a little bit further. So from God, and this is the expression in John 1:1 in the King James Version, in the beginning was the Word. So prior, there was something in the beginning. So the beginning from scientific thought is quantum fluctuation giving rise to the Big Bang. So I know people are familiar with the phrase, the Big Bang Theory, and there's a television show on that, which is a great show, but may not be as familiar with quantum fluctuation. Let me come back to that. The Tao, nothingness, gives rise to the universe itself. So the universe is the one. And the one can be interpreted as a universe because the word universe literally means one verse or one song. I also want to point to the Eastern thought here and scientific thought, quantum fluctuation giving rise to the Big Bang. The Big Bang as the origin of the universe itself, there's a danger here to dismiss it as just another theory. No, the reality is the Big Bang Theory is well established as a scientific theory backed up by many converging lines of evidence. What about quantum fluctuation giving rise to the Big Bang? Well, it would be like nothingness giving rise to something. Literally, that's what it means. In 2014, scientists actually came up with a rigorous mathematical proof for the concept of quantum fluctuation causing a Big Bang. So it is something that at least is mathematically consistent, unlike the concept of the multiverse, which is a lovely concept, but it's an unproven hypothesis. Now, I know that a lot of people are interested to delve deeper into quantum fluctuations, string theory, M theory, etc. Those are beyond the scope of our discussion. I want to stick closely to the Tao and then talk about the next step, the one giving rise to the two. What is that? So in Genesis 1:1, again, the King James Version, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So here, I want to pause there and just highlight that if you understand what the Tao Te Ching is saying, you recognize it here. This is one, God, the Word, giving rise to heaven and earth, the two. And then a little bit later on, in Genesis, it says, God divided the light from darkness. Again, it is from the one comes the complementary duality. In science, there's no clear-cut complementary duality. Shortly after the Big Bang, it is the emergence of fundamental forces and the separation of the strong and electroweak forces, what they also call interactions. Fundamental forces begin with gravitation and followed by electromagnetic, weak and strong interactions. Now you could take a longer view and see the two, the complementary duality in terms of matter and energy. Matter and energy are really, as Einstein demonstrated, one and the same. One leads to the other, and yet they manifest very differently. So that has a close correspondence in the Tao as well, where the Tao talks about how oneness gives rise to the complementary duality, which can manifest, as the Bible says, as heaven and earth, light and darkness, plus all other complementary dualities that one can imagine. In science, as I mentioned, it can be matter/energy. So interesting correspondence in all of these, and this is all just from zero, the Tao, to the one thing, the something, the universe itself, and then to complementary duality from the one to the two. What is beyond two? Let's take a closer look. Two produce three. So now, the ancient sages also observed that interaction was an important element. Yin flowing into yang and vice versa. So with the yin and yang symbol, you don't have a straight line between the two. You don't have a division. You have a graceful curve between the two, indicating that yin and yang are constantly going into each other's territory. It's a depiction of motion, depiction of movement. Therefore, existence, much more than just a static separation of yin and yang. It's dynamic, full of actions and movements, more like a dance. Why do we human beings enjoy dance? Well, it's baked into our very nature. It's part of the Tao. In that dance, you can even see the yin and yang symbol in its rotation, yin into yang, yang into yin. It is like a choreographed dance movement. Out of this, we can take a higher level view and say that, well, think of it as transformation and transitions, or just change the eternal constant. In previous meetings, I talked about how change is at the heart of the Tao. This is why the first book on the Tao is not the Tao Te Ching, but Yi Jing, the book of changes, the book of transformation. That's what we're talking about here. Therefore, dynamism is the third factor that emerges from duality. That is, the two halves of duality begin to interact with one another, begin to move in accordance with one another. So then, this brings us to everything else. The yin and yang, plus their interactions, the way they interact with one another, that is all that is necessary to generate or create everything out there. The profusion of colorful diversity we see in the world. So what we're talking about now can be summarized like this: 0 to 1 to 2, and then the third factor leading to everything. This thought process is not unique to the Tao. There are conceptual similarities in Western traditions, which we use the Judeo-Christian as the representative for that. So here's how it looks. In Tao Te Ching 42, we begin with 0 to 1, or the Tao, something emerges out of nothing. The oneness emerges out of 0. In the Bible, God created Adam. Therefore, from no human to one human. And the imagery is the Michelangelo painting. And the name of the painting literally is God creates Adam. Then we have from the 1 to the 2, right? So that's what it says in the Tao Te Ching. Oneness polarizes into complementary aspects, which in the Bible is the God taking a rib out of Adam and created Eve. Therefore, from one human, you now have 2. And we have a classical painting to depict that as well. Then there's the third factor. What is that? 2 to 3. The third factor is change. Change animates both yin and yang. It manifests as circular movements, which just means interactions. In the Bible, the third factor is, guess what? The apple in the Garden of Eden. Apple represents knowledge. Biting into the apple imparts the knowledge, and shame. That's a representative way to say that knowledge changes you irrevocably. Nothing can be the same again. Once your mind has expanded, it will not go back to its previous dimension. In classical painting, full of that biblical interpretation and depiction. Then finally, from the 3 to myriad things, we're talking about continuous universal creation everywhere. That's part of the pattern that we were just looking at. In the Bible, it's the fall from the Garden of Eden. So Adam and Eve went forth, became fruitful to multiply. So from 2 humans, we got all human beings, according to the Bible. The diversity of mankind. So you can see it's very easy. This is an example of how to see the same Tao pattern expressed in 42 to every tradition. Why? Because it's a common core of humanity. These patterns reiterate and reflect themselves throughout all of human history, all human ways of thinking about the world. So there's a lot more to talk about this. I mean, even just a biblical story, there's so much more to it. But we'll do that the next time when we come back after our slightly longer break. For now, we have to go to summary. Once again, time flies while we're having fun. We now must summarize what we have talked about today, which has everything to do with balance. So I spoke of how yin and yang are energy states that we possess, all of us, whether male or female. And the important thing is to have balance between the two. Too much of one or the other leads to bad results, lack of happiness. When the two are in harmonious balance, there is joy. So question for the summary: how would you balance the yin and yang energies within yourself in every aspect of your life? And I'm going to provide some basis for thinking about this with a column for yin, a column for yang, and how they can interact with one another. Example 1, the yin state, resting, charging your batteries, downtime. The yang state, being productive, getting stuff done. As one of my friends likes to say, kicking butts, taking names. Oh yeah, get that stuff done. So these are the two states. There has to be balance between the two. You need both. You need to recharge your batteries, and then you can put that energy to use in productivity. How do you create the proper balance, the optimal balance between the two? And that is not the only yin and yang pair that we be concerned with. There's also this. When it comes to work, you want to plan the work and work the plan. To plan the work involves thinking, not actions, but to lay out the plan of what should be done, the sequence, the order, the priority, contingencies. Yang is when you take action on the plan. So you have to plan the work and work the plan. If you simply work without a plan, that spells trouble. If you plan without the work, nothing gets done. Gotta have the balance. Listen to others, to be receptive, to be there, to lend a sympathetic ear. That is a yin state. Yang state is to express yourself to others. That includes explaining, persuading, just expressing yourselves in general, describing. There has to be a healthy balance between the two as well. You want to both listen and express. Next, quiet time by yourself, contemplation, reflection, social time with friends. There's got to be an optimal balance between the two. Too much in one end or the other can be negative. The great balance, the optimal balance between the two, happy life. Study the Tao, explain the Tao. If you only study without ever explaining the Tao, I guarantee your understanding will be limited. If you explain the Tao without studying, you are just making stuff up. Lastly, observe the situation and take appropriate action. There is a time to observe, and then there is a time to act. Acting without observation you are running headlong into a brick wall. Observing without taking action? Well, don't be complaining about something not turning out the way you wanted to if you are not willing to do anything, not willing to take the appropriate action. So this is just the seed that I want to plant, hopefully to get you thinking about the balance of yin and yang, the two energy states in your life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.